Welcome to BledTalk, the podcast where insightful conversations meet language learning. I'm your host, Samuel Bledsoe, and on this show, we dive deep into a variety of topics with fascinating guests from all walks of life. Whether you're an English learner looking to sharpen your language skills, or simply someone who enjoys thought-provoking discussions, BledTalk is something for you. From engaging interviews to solo episodes filled with knowledge and inspiration, join us as we explore the world one conversation at a time. Get ready for a journey of learning, curiosity, and meaningful dialogues. Welcome to BledTalk. Welcome everybody this week to BledTalk. We have a very special guest. His name is Ash, and he is also an English teacher. He's from the UK. He's on Instagram. He's on TikTok. And very soon, he said he'll be on YouTube. And he's been teaching English for a while now. He has a really great history, and I just really want to get straight into it. And Ash, can you go ahead and tell us just a little bit about you, about your past and your history?
Sure, yeah. Once again, thank you very much, Sam, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm Ash. I'm an English teacher, and I have my Instagram and social channels you might know me from. I started teaching about 5 years ago, and I wasn't originally an English teacher. Back then, I was a dancer. I was a professional dancer. And I decided I wanted a change in careers, really. I wanted to try something new. And I've always taught dance. I've been an avid fan of teaching. So I decided, I've taught dance before. I've taught some of my friends English as I've worked across the world. So why not teach English? So I retrained as an English teacher 5 years ago. And I started to practice all the things I needed to know. I did some free lessons with a lot of people just to gain lots of experience, really. And my first kind of big teaching job was actually at a primary school in the UK. And I worked there for quite a while, for about 2 years. And it was a fantastic experience, really. It taught me a lot. I learned a lot from all of the teachers there. They're really, really fantastic teachers in that primary school. And I was there when COVID hit, which is unfortunate, but it did allow me to understand how to teach online, really. I was in charge of supporting their online learning infrastructure, actually for a couple of schools in that area, in that district. And that gave me pretty good understanding of how to keep people engaged online. And as a teacher yourself, I'm sure you know that it can be quite challenging when you're not in the room with someone. It's a completely different experience. So you need to have a slightly different skill set to be able to deal with those challenges. So that's something that I learned while I was there. And I continued to do my studies and learn more about English teaching. And I then moved up north to Leeds in the UK. And I worked with Leeds University, helping international students come into the UK and helping them with all the English cultural changes and the culture shock they have, just generally helping them understand like the way of writing and structuring essays and understanding their teacher and their lecturer, which can be quite intimidating for, freshmen when they're coming straight to the UK from wherever they did their education. It's a tough thing. It's a tough thing moving countries and learning there. So, but that was a really eye-opening experience. And that kind of gave me the skills to be able to really understand someone's perspective as to, what they want to do and how to assist them in the best way, really. And from then, I was doing a bit of my social media stuff on the side, making content, which was really, really fun for me, and doing a few lessons as well. And then I decided to just go straight for that. And so I went to an online, full-time online English teacher. That's what I became. And I've been doing that since then, really. I moved now from the UK to Japan. And I'm still working face-to-face here with some students and with some schools. But I'm also working with a lot of students, lovely students, online as well, and assisting them with their English and with whatever they really want to be when they grow up and when they develop in their English, really.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That is a great story. And you said that kind of before as a dancer, you also were all over the world, right? You went to different places.
Yeah.
these things. What was your favorite place to be in? I guess, or as a dancer or as an English teacher, what was your
Oh,
favorite place to visit?
well, it's quite difficult. So I think I've probably visited about 68 different countries
Oh,
in my previous line of work, and well, it's quite challenging. I would say one that definitely stuck out to me is probably Singapore. Fantastic place.
okay.
And as a dancer, it was just an amazing place to be. It's a city that just doesn't really sleep, and it's just constantly going and going. It's incredible. There's so much stuff packed into such a small area, really. It's surprising. Around every corner, there's just something new, and it's very accessible in
Yeah.
terms of public transport, but even, getting a taxi from one place to another, it doesn't take long. You can be go from the beach to a theme park to a shopping center to the Chinatown to India Town, all within about 5 minute drive. So it's quite
Wow.
impressive,
Yeah.
really. So for me, that shocked me a lot. I'd say that's
Those-
probably one that I remember the
One
most.
of the most memorable times. No, that's great. And do you think that those experiences that you had while traveling the world kind of helped you in your English teaching? Do you think that
Oh,
those?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think it's given me a better understanding of the culture of many of my students that I've had. It's quite a nice thing to be able to have a student and say, yeah, I've been to your country or I've been to your city and I know what it's like.
Mhm.
I've had the food, I've seen the culture, I've
Yeah.
spoken to the people. So I think it really helps me kind of understand where people are coming from, where they start their journey, and also helps me to kind of assist them along their journey as well. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really really useful thing.
And it kind of builds that bridge between the teacher and the student, because sometimes we have difficulty kind of understanding each other and where each other come from, especially when for example, you're from the UK and your other student may be from a different country, a different culture that could be completely different from that Western culture. Sometimes it's difficult to build that. I know a little bit about you, and hopefully you'll know a little bit about me. Because one time I had a student, he had asked me, he said, why do you explain so much about where you're from, and why do you kind of give people an insight to your life when you're teaching? And I tell them that it's important. It's important that they understand who I am and what I know, versus what they know. And kind of, I want to help connect with them. And I think that connection also really helps them learn better as well, because when you feel more relaxed and you feel happy with the person that you're studying with, I think that can really take your English to a whole nother level. Um,
Definitely agree with that. Yeah, yeah. I think having that sense of trust between the student and the teacher is a huge thing, because in the lesson the student is pushing themselves into maybe what might feel like nerve-wracking or uncomfortable kind of feelings. Really, they're trying English out that they're not confident with, or that they might feel a bit intimidated by. So having that trust already and having that kind of safe, kind of comfortable feeling already with the teacher and having that rapport really allows them to push themselves in their own aspects, as opposed to worrying about the situation at hand. I think it's a really good thing.
yeah, absolutely. And how would you say did you get to Japan? Was that just kind of a choice, or did you have an opportunity that showed up and you said, I'm gonna go there, or were you just kind of looking for something different?
Well, I've previously guest danced in Japan before, and it was quite an interesting experience. It was one that stuck with me, and I thought, I'd like to maybe try living here. I've always wanted to try living in a country that was very, very different to the UK. And I guess Japan is probably one of the furthest away countries from the UK, so it's not a bad choice. Also, my wife is from Japan, so it was quite a good thing for me to come over here and meet her family and get to know her. And I want to learn the language as well. So it was all these things combined together. The will to want to move here, the chance to learn the language, and the opportunity to meet my wife's family that kind of brought me to this place. And maybe, yeah,
Yeah, and it helps you kind of with the culture as well, kind of be able to understand your family, and something I think is important, especially because because a lot of people know, but I'm married to a Brazilian, and so the difference between American culture and Brazilian culture is, for at least for me, it's very different. And so being here helps me understand why she does a lot of the things that she does. And I think, because sometimes when, any married couple has their disagreements, but sometimes that disagreement happens because of a cultural difference. And once you understand that cultural difference, it's not that, they're like, oh, this is great. No, once you understand that difference, it kind of helps you understand, okay, she's not doing this because she wants to make me mad. She's doing this because it's part of how she grew up and who she is. And I think the same thing, with her being able to go to, because you met her in the UK, right? Your wife?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she kind of already understood that culture and understood why you did what you did. And now being there, that can help. That can help. That's
definitely, really... Yeah. I think as well, it makes you, it also pushes you out of your comfort zone a little bit as well. And I think for me, that's great because then I can empathize with my students a bit better and understand maybe I've got a lot of students who live in the UK and maybe they've lived there for a year, 5 months, maybe even 3 years. And so it just gives me a better understanding of really how they feel and what struggles they might be going through because I will have lived that myself as well.
Right. What it's like to be the immigrant, right? Instead of...
Exactly. Yeah.
Because a lot of times I hear people talk about it all the time, but just recently I had that thought, and I was like, I immigrated here. I live in Brazil, and so I kind of know what it's like to be the outsider, right? Be the person that doesn't fit in with everybody else, and it's important to know because you can help people kind of cope with that change because the language, like we were talking about before, language and the culture kind of go together.
Yeah, exactly.
And as a British English teacher, do you think that people kind of seek you out specifically because of your of where you're from in Britain and that you have that accent? Have you felt that at all or not so much?
Yeah, I would say that maybe perhaps 30 to 40% of students who want to take classes with me want to take classes because of my accent or because of where I'm from. So maybe they're looking specifically for a native teacher or they're looking for someone with an accent like mine, which is a standard Southern British accent, in case anyone wonders what accent it is. I would say probably about 30 to 40%. I would say maybe perhaps all of the rest, the other 60 or 70%, just want me based on their content, or they want to take lessons with me because perhaps my personality or the way in which I teach.
Right.
But you're definitely right, kind of hitting the nail on the head with about 30 to 40%.
I would say I say that because I have that same experience. People will, and what's interesting is that people will come to you and they'll say, "Oh, I really want to study with a native teacher," and I'm happy that being native, will help me get students and help me grow as a business. But at the same time, sometimes, I don't know if you've had this feeling, but I did in the beginning, not so much now, but people would say, "Oh, I'm doing classes with you because you're native." And I'm like, I wish it was because I was a good teacher or they like my method or, I kind of feel like it should be more than just because I'm, of the United States. But I've come to understand that when someone says I study with you because you're native, it doesn't mean just because you're native, because you understand what it means. There's a lot more to being a native speaker than just being able to speak perfectly. You have that ability to understand. And I also tell people that just because someone's native doesn't mean that they can teach their language very well. I tell the upside of having a native teacher is that we can tell you when something is wrong, but that doesn't mean, but we can't tell you why it's wrong sometimes. If you say something and it doesn't sound right, we can say, yeah, that's not right. But if you haven't studied it, you're not going to be able to say why it's not right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an important difference between a native who teaches English to foreigners and just somebody who can speak really well.
But I do believe that it's kind of also a good thing. Maybe people will seek you out or seek myself out because you're a native speaker, because it kind of proves to me already that that person is willing to put themselves in a situation that maybe they feel intimidated or uncomfortable by. Yeah, because it's not easy speaking to a native speaker, especially we're speaking a language that might be your third or fourth language that you don't feel confident with. So for me, that already tells me that the person really, really wants something and they're going for it. They're not just going to get any English training, they're going to get English training from a native. And I like seeing people who are driven and who have that kind of goal in mind. And it's always a start, really, isn't it? Even if someone joins your classes because you're a native speaker, what matters is if they stay after the first 2 or 3 classes. If they stay after that, then that's already proof in itself that you're a good teacher, in my opinion.
Absolutely. No, I agree. That's something that I think is interesting, is if your students stay, then, that's because you're doing a good job, you're doing something.
Exactly.
And that's wonderful. And another thing kind of on this line of like British English and American English, do you ever have, or I guess do you get frequently the question of something that may be like an American English thing that they saw in a movie or something, and you kind of have to explain that? Or like, do you ever have that kind of, would you say that it's a difficulty or just something different where you have to explain American English versus British English?
Yeah, I don't think people are so confused when it comes to the actual vocabulary itself. I think that's generally quite clear. There's so much content online about that, made by both native English speakers on both sides of the pond, right? So whether you're British or American content creator, I'm sure you've done something like that. However, I do get a lot of questions about spelling, because obviously there's a difference in spelling.
Yeah.
I would say, which one is correct? Is it learned or learned, or earned or earned? And I have to say, well, both, but it depends what you're learning, right?
Right.
And I would also say pronunciation is another thing. People say, I heard someone say like this or like this, and I have to say, well, what accent do you want, right?
Right.
And that's the main thing, really. So, because I think an accent is something that people can choose and they can adjust it how they see fit. But also having a bit of consistency within your accent is also a great thing. So if you're maybe going for a British accent, you should probably choose whether you want a Northern British or a Southern British, because if you're switching between the two, it can end up being a little confusing for non-natives and native speakers alike. So for me, that's one thing. I always have to check with people. What sort of accent are you maybe aiming for? Are you looking to change it? Are you looking to stay the same? It's quite an important point for me before I can even answer any questions regarding some pronunciations.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because I always tell people whenever they come and they ask about accents and things like that, I say, well, first, I'm from the middle of the United States. We call it the Midwest. And in the Midwest of the U.S., our accent is very normal. It's the Hollywood accent. And so what happens is that for me and for a lot of people, I don't have any special type of American accent. I have the accent that is the easiest to understand, I think, in the whole United States. Because there's the Southern accent, which is it's difficult, I think, to really, and then there's the Northeastern accent, which is also difficult, but faster. I think that's one of the big differences. And there's people out west too, but then us who are just right in the middle, we have that. For us, we think it's a boring accent because it just doesn't have anything. And which makes me also think, I go, I'm talking to Ash right now, and for me, he has an accent. And I imagine for you, I have an American accent. And so like, it's weird how sometimes you don't hear your own, you don't hear your own accent. But like outside of that, sometimes it can be interesting to hear someone speak.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you have you ever been to the United States before, or no?
No. This is one thing that I'm really disappointed about, because I've been to so many countries, but I've not been to the US. I've been close. I was meant to go to Florida, but just because of the way things worked out, I never actually got there. But it's kind of a hassle to go. We're getting like visas and things like that. Even just for tourist visa, it's quite a lot of work. And it's not particularly close from the UK to fly over there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the two main barriers, I guess, for me, which is a shame because I do want to visit one day. So.
Yeah. I always tell people I really do want to visit. I want to visit England as well. I want to go to, I guess, so that's a question I have. So I hear I hear UK, I hear Britain, I hear England. Is that all refers to like the southern half of the island, right? Or how does that work as well?
Should we do a quick like geography?
Yeah, quick
challenge. Yeah,
because for us, we always hear UK, we hear England, and it's like all. I know that there's a difference in the flags. I know that much.
Yeah, okay, that's already a start. That's a good start.
Yeah, but curious. So like, when you say London, London is in England, correct?
Yeah, it's probably easier if you start out and then go in, I reckon.
Okay.
So if we start like at the furthest most point, or the widest, probably you'd say the British Isles. No. And that is just all the islands that are in like the water, basically, in that area. So you've got the island that makes up the UK, England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland. And also some other places like Jersey and these other little smaller islands, which are either kind of, parts of the UK or kind of colonies and things like that. So you've got all of these little islands here. And then when we strip it down a bit more, we say the United Kingdom, which then Ireland disappears. So you've got Northern Ireland, then you've got Wales, England, Scotland.
Right.
And then you've got Great Britain, which is Northern Ireland disappears.
Okay.
Which is just Wales, England, and Scotland. And then you can break it down further to, the individual countries. So England, Wales, Scotland. And then inside of England is the capital, London.
Okay.
So that's kind of like macro to micro scale, basically.
Yeah. No, I think that clears things up, because I feel like the words get thrown around too much,
Definitely, yeah.
Without people knowing what they really refer to. But that's cool. And then, so here I have a cultural question, I think, just kind of with Europe, because Europe is the one thing that's the one place that I would love to visit, but it's the whole same difficulty of, very far away, kind of expensive to go to. Yeah. So in England, people always talk about, at least in the United States, we talk about how we as Americans are super far behind because we speak English and that's it. Like, if someone speaks a second language in the US, they're already much more elevated than the rest of them. And in Europe, is it common for people to speak 2 or 3 or 4 languages? And how are people seen who don't speak, more than a couple languages?
So I think in Europe, it's very common to speak at least 2 languages.
Mm-hmm.
However, in the UK, don't think it's as common.
Really?
Yeah, it's definitely not as common as Europe. It's mainland Europe. And I think that's mainly one big thing is because Europe consumes a lot of English media, whether that's songs, whether that's television, films. So they'll watch a lot of films, and it might not necessarily be dubbed over in their own language. Maybe Disney films and animated films, but probably the rest is just subtitles, which means that people generally are exposed to a lot more of English. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the UK, we don't really get a lot of European content. I mean, the last big thing I can remember is probably the song Despacito, I reckon. is the last big kind of thing that I think a lot of people, knew the words to. That was not English, basically.
English,
yeah. So I don't think we're exposed to it as much. We do learn another language in school, but the interesting thing is, like, whether you come from like France or Germany, Denmark or Italy, probably you were taught English in school.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the UK, because we already know English, like all of our separate schools are all teaching different things. So you get to choose like whether you learn German, Italian, French, Spanish. So that also makes makes it more difficult to like
Yeah.
keep
Well,
that
and
going.
it kind of makes it sound like we're both in the same boat. With,
Mm,
well,
yeah,
and I think, I don't know if it's not, I don't know, I wouldn't blame, you know, United States or the UK for not learning another language, but it's kind of because English is also a global language, and so
yeah,
most of the time, if you speak English, a lot of other people also speak English, and so that's kind of the easiest form of communication.
yeah,
And so unless you, for example, I speak Portuguese, but I speak Portuguese because I live in Brazil, and that it's something that I have to do, that I need to do. If I would have just stayed in the United States, I probably wouldn't have learned Portuguese. I probably wouldn't have learned any type of Spanish or anything like that. As much as I would have liked to, I just don't think that I would have tried so hard to
mm,
do so.
yeah,
And I also think, like you said, I think it has a lot to do with the media as well, because for us in the U.S., we watch Hollywood movies, which I think a lot of people do, and the whole world
mhm,
watches them. And I did a podcast with a teacher one time, and she had an interesting view on this. And she said, so many countries get angry with Americans because we don't know a lot about their country, yet they know a lot about our country. And you can't really get mad at them, because the thing is we don't have the, I guess, the norm to watch foreign films in the US. And so it's, when we watch Hollywood movies, we're just watching movies that are made in our backyard, right? Whereas
yeah,
for other people, it's a whole nother culture, it's a whole new thing that they kind of learn from. And so they kind of have that opportunity to see into the country, whereas for us,
definitely.
we don't really have that trade. And I think something I think that is interesting, example for between like UK and United States. I don't know. I'm going to ask you, and you can be honest, but
Yeah,
Americans, the way we see a lot of people in the UK, we almost see their accent as being like more intellectual, being somebody who can. It's how we see it. I know it's weird, but for us, that's how we see people from the UK. Like they come over and they have this accent, and for us, we're like, oh wow, they must know a lot. They must be very, very intelligent and very polite, because your English is a lot more formal, I
yeah.
think, than ours.
Well, I think what's really interesting, so I'll talk about 2 points there, and one of them has already been covered by an amazing language professor. I'll get his name in a bit; it's just come from my memory. But he was talking a lot about how in a lot of Hollywood films and television, the bad guy, the smart, bad guy who has all the plans and world domination, he normally has a posh British accent. I don't know if you've noticed that. It's a very, very common thing that,
Yeah, it
you look at
is.
Star Wars, like General Tarkin, all of them have got posh British accents. And so it's kind of this stereotype in a lot of media that this, the intelligent one or the smart one or even the conniving one is going to have, a British accent. So I think that's partially where that comes from, for sure, which is quite interesting. And the second point is that even within the UK, there's like almost like a bit of a hierarchy of languages, let's say accents and
Yeah.
dialects,
Mhm.
that, indicates whether people might see you as more intellectual or less intellectual, which is really interesting. I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. I think whatever accent you have, you can be smart or you can
Yes.
be not so smart. But I really think it's kind of one thing that maybe has come from the UK all the way to America. So if you speak with an RP accent, a very received pronunciation accent, which is seen as very posh, you might be seen as more intelligent. Whereas you speak with a more like kind of casual working class accent, people may perceive you as being less intelligent, which I think, as I said, it's an unfair stereotype,
Yeah.
and one that is thankfully kind of disappearing within, our modern day. But yeah, I do think that kind of the remnants of that have made their way across the pond, unfortunately, to some degree.
Well, it's
But
in how. So I guess then an interesting question would be kind of how do you guys in the UK, how do you perceive the American accent, like the way that the Americans speak English? Do you think that most British people are, I mean, I know you can't speak for everyone, but Do you think, like, in general, the feeling is more like we don't, you just don't care, or you think it's different, or it's worse, or it's better? Is there something there you think, or?
I think a lot of people would see the American accent as quite like an optimistic accent. Whenever we think of American, we think of the accent, we think someone quite confident, maybe a little brash,
Yeah.
and full of optimism, really. And I
Yeah.
would say that the British accent is kind of the inverse of that. It's someone maybe a little bit pessimistic, sarcastic, perhaps even dry at times. So I think that's probably a big difference. And that's also perpetuated within the culture as well, I would say.
Yeah.
If you take, for example, comedies, if you look at American comedies, there's a lot more kind of like happy-go-lucky humor within that. Whereas you take a British comedy, they tend to be awkward, perhaps even a little bit cringy and difficult to watch. So I think that's kind of part of it as well, and that culture has shaped the language. So I would say that's maybe how a lot of British people might view the American accent.
No, I think that's very, very interesting. I haven't heard it explained like that before. So that was really good. And I think it's interesting because I like to use the difference between the British accent and the American accent when it comes to other languages as well, like the more spoken ones. For example, Portuguese was spoken in Portugal first, and then they brought it over to Brazil, and Brazilian Portuguese and Portugal Portuguese is very, very different. Even so that if you go to subtitles and you want to choose Portuguese, you have the option of Brazilian Portuguese and Portugal Portuguese. Just because of how different they are. And one time I did see a couple places that had American English and British English as the subtitles as well. And I thought, I said, are they that different? Is it that difficult to understand the difference? But from becoming an English teacher, I've really been able to connect with a lot more of English than just in the United States. And it's really been a fun experience because, like I said, I'm from the Midwest, the U.S., and so I'm not close to any big city that gets a lot of foreigners. And so for us, people who have accents is very, very far and few and difficult to find. And talking with you and a couple other people who from outside the U.S. helps me understand, and I think helps a lot of people understand just the big how small our world is, but also the bigger picture. Kind of how language really does affect and shape things. And we're kind of getting close to the end, but I wanted to know from you, what are, if you can share them, I know sometimes people like to keep them secret, but what are some of your biggest tips for English learners or just language learners in general?
Okay, that's a good one. So I would say, if possible, link your language learning with a passion. So if, for example, your passion is, let's say, I don't know, video games, then you should be trying to play those video games in English with English friends, right? And trying to find them online and chatting with them. If your passion is fashion, then make a fashion blog or, do a TikTok where everything is in English, right? And talking about your passion. That's the fastest way you can get that vocabulary into your brain, is when your brain associates it with something you're interested in and something you enjoy, right?
Yeah.
If you're learning while you're happy, you're not learning, you're just absorbing, right? That's it. It's just absorbing straight in. I would say, if you can, surround yourself with as much English as possible. That's very difficult if you're living in a country where there's no other English speakers, or you're living in a community where it's very difficult to practice English. But try your best. Listen to music, listen to audio books, listen to podcasts like this one. Do what you can, really. You need to be immersing yourself, whether it's washing the dishes, whether it's, sitting in the bath, whatever. You need to be immersing yourself. And finally, I would say, try and push yourself every day to try new vocabulary. Whether you write that down, whether you speak with your teacher, whether you speak with a friend, try something new each conversation you have. So it could be anything. It can be a sentence structure, it can be a grammatical structure, it can be just a word or a phrase or an idiom, anything. Just try something new, because if you don't, you'll always use the same 10, 15, 20% of English that you feel comfortable with, and you'll never push the boundaries, and that will hinder your growth. So those are my 3 big tips.
No, absolutely. Kind of leaving your comfort zone, I think is a good way to think of that. Just kind of pushing yourself. I always tell people that when I learned Portuguese, I learned the most when I just decided to do things that I wouldn't normally do, if that makes sense. Talk to people that I wouldn't normally talk to, try to talk about things that I didn't feel comfortable talking about. But like you also said, linking it to something that you're passionate about, that you love, is also going to help you, because like you said, when you're happy, you absorb it. You're a sponge.
Yeah.
I always tell people something interesting that I learned during one of the certificates that I had to do for English was that you, when you're happy, or when you're relaxed and you're learning English, it stays with you. It stays with you for a long time, and it's hard to forget. Whereas if you learn it when you're under a high stress situation, as soon as you're not stressed, you're going to forget it. And so, I think that those are some really, really awesome tips. And go ahead.
No, I definitely think that one of the kind of things that people hate about learning English is, or let's say practicing English, is getting to that point where you don't know what to say, where you're, I want to say something, but I don't know what to say. So people kind of shy away from that. But really, you should try and get to that point every conversation. You should be getting onto the boundary of where your English knowledge is at every conversation. Every time you can, you should try and move the topic to something that you maybe can't explain properly, because the person that you're with will be able to support you, will be able to help you. And then you'll be able to absorb that new vocabulary, and your boundary will start to expand, really. But people are afraid of getting to that point, and I totally understand. Learning a new language myself, it's scary, right? You don't want to just stand there staring at the other person, mouth open like a fish, like but it's kind of good, really. It's kind of good, just like stretching your body, right? You get to the point where it's like painful and you're like, oh, I want to stop, but you just keep going, and now you're more flexible than you were before. So there's a dancer's analogy, learning English. So.
But it's a good one. But
it works. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Ash, thank you very much for coming and talking.
My pleasure.
Here. And for everybody who's listening, if you have any questions or comments, or you have anything else that you would like to hear more about, you can, obviously on YouTube, you can comment, or if you're listening on anything else, you can send me or Ash any questions in our social medias. And I'm sure that in the future, if we have enough to go off of, or even if we don't, just Ash, if you want to come back and you want to be on another episode, then I'll be more than happy to have you. And
I'd love to,
continue the conversation, because it was really good, and I enjoyed so much. It was fantastic.
Me too. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it was a really lovely experience, and nice to talk with a fellow teacher, especially one as talented as yourself. So
appreciate it. Thank you. But yeah, everyone who's listening, thank you so much for making it to this point of the conversation. Don't forget to go follow Ash and to participate in anything that he has to offer, because he will definitely help you soar and get to that goal that you have in English. So once again, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful night where you are, and we'll see you next time on BledTalk. Thank you for listening to BledTalk. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more content. We are on all of the popular podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and we're even on YouTube. Don't forget to send in your questions and your suggestions. Thank you once again, and have a great day.